Hello, I'm Lisa Burkhart-Worley, and welcome to Pop Talk, the show where you never know what subjects might pop up. Well, have you ever paid attention to the patterns in your lives, things that happen in just one after the next, and you're wondering how they're all connected? Well, today we're going to talk to a woman who is going to explain what it means to connect the dots in your life. It's going to be a fascinating message today and a fascinating pop talk, and I know you're going to want to stick around and to hear what this is all about. But before we introduce her, I want to introduce our Pop Talk co-host. Let me start on this, my immediate right this time, Dr. Lynette Sim. I always feel like I kind of leap over you to Rosemary. And then to my far right is Rosemary LeGrand.
Hello, everyone.
So today, I'm just so excited about this show. We're going to be talking about connecting the dots. And our person that we're going to be interviewing is Gloria Ashby. Gloria Ashby is a longtime friend, and she's written this book called Connecting the Dots, Learning to Live a Word-Shaped Life. Now, she connects the dots for herself and others by teaching and leading Bible studies and mentoring in both secular and faith-based settings. Her passion is to be an ambassador for Christ, sharing his word and encouraging others to realize their full potential as children of our God and Creator. That's a great calling. Now, in addition to authoring numerous inspirational stories, you can find them in Chicken Soup for the Soul and other devotionals, Gloria has also co-authored with Roaring Lambs Ministries, near and dear to both of our hearts, because I used to work there and help them with some books. She helped them with their workbook. It's called My Story for God's Glory, telling what he has done for me. It's all about learning how to do your testimony. So this book that you've written, Gloria, and by the way, welcome to Pop Talk. We're so glad to have you here. This book that you've written is a collection of 70 real-life experiences that helps the reader understand how God uses the ordinary things, like these dots, these patterns, to direct our life. I always say, I'm not going to make a move until God gives me 3 messages, you know. And so, this reminded me, when I was looking at your book, it reminded me of when I was moved out of our church. It was a large church, but it wasn't as large as the church that God took me to. And he took us to a mega church. And so many times I've sat there in the pew and I thought, I'm just a dot at this place. I'm just a little dot in this big sea of dots, you know, and God is, it was really humbling when you see so many people that are doing things just like what we're doing. And so can you talk a little bit about the concept of dots and how this all works in relation to God's larger plan?
Absolutely. Thank you, first of all, for being here and giving me that opportunity. Connecting the dots, that started when I was doing a Bible study with another group of individuals, and this one lady came and got inspired in one of the readings. It was about a study about being fruitful. And her comment was, I just feel like the Holy Spirit is telling me to stand down. You're just a dot. You're a dot, you're a dot, you're a dot. Let God connect the dots. And it occurred to me, if I connected the dots to his word, that was like the Israelites being led out of slavery and bondage. God led them and invited them to join him. But he was the one that was out front. He was the one that was making the way and connecting. And that's what I think it's like with God. And it occurred to me, my stance has always been, I can do it myself. I'm going to work on my own power.
How did that work for you?
Not well. Not very well at all. But for many reasons, that was how I tried to approach life. And I guess that it just occurred to me that, no, it's not under my power. It's under God's leading and power. And he has just asked me to join him. So by many choices or many circumstances, different events are happening around the world, and that is God at work in my little part of the world. It's kind of like I describe it in the book, or what occurred to me, it's like a dot picture. You know, if you look at those big posters with lots of dots, and they're beautiful colors and an array of colors, and all the dots are real close to each other, and it's just two-dimensional, and it's very lovely in and of itself, but it's very randomly placed. But as you stare at that picture, if it's created correctly, you begin to see a third dimension. The dots begin to be not just two-dimensional, they're three-dimensional. They form a three-dimensional object when you're staring at them. It's called an ostereogram. But it's where they form, flowers or a person or a scene. And that's what God is doing. When we look on the surface of all that's happening in our dots, it is two-dimensional sometimes to us. And only as we really look around at all the small things that are happening and reflect, listen for the Holy Spirit, do we see that third dimension of what's God really doing that is deeper perhaps than just what we see on the surface.
But you got to pay attention.
You have to pay attention.
Yeah.
You have to take the time to take a step back and pay attention.
So your book, Connecting the Dots, is a collection of short stories. But at the end of each story, you actually connect these dots. So sometimes we all may kind of feel like just a dot, and we obviously don't make that big of a difference. But in one of your stories, you talk about the missing ingredient. So, for example, my daughter loves to bake, and she's gluten-free. So she's putting all the ingredients as normal, but without a leavening agent like baking powder, it doesn't work. And so that missing ingredient is that dot. So how can we relate that to our lives?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's one that was kind of a founding experience of mine in terms of learning to connect the dots. It was during a time I was making cornbread for a group of people, and I didn't have the 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder. I had everything else, but not the baking powder. And I thought, it's just a little 1/4 teaspoon. We don't need it. Well, if you're a cook, you know.
You had unleavened bread is what you had.
I had, and it turned out to be a beautifully golden brown hockey puck of cornbread. And I shared that story with someone, and they said, but I've always felt too small to count. And that's when it hit me. That was I can do it myself, because I always felt too small to count. And I can't tell you how many times I dismissed or didn't take opportunities where I could make a difference. And the key is, if I had stepped in and now try to step in, regardless of how much I think I bring, whether it's the egg and the cornmeal or the milk, or is it just the 1/4 teaspoon that I don't think is going to make a difference, that 1/4 teaspoon might very well be the leaven, the catalyst that makes all the other ingredients rise to the occasion.
That's beautiful.
So even when I think I'm too small to count, remember it connected me to the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000. What did he do that with? 5 loaves of bread and 2 little bitty fish. And yet he fed 5,000 men, not to mention all the women and children that were there. So it reminded me, and I carry a little 1/4 teaspoon with me all the time to remind me that it's that little 1/4 teaspoon of whatever I've got that I can bring to the table. And in the hands of Jesus, my not enough is more than enough.
I think of words. And it could be just a kind word. One, you don't even think it's any big deal, but you give somebody a kind word, and that day maybe they were really down and they needed it.
Yeah. I've had people come back and tell me that, you said so-and-so to me, and that just meant so much, and here's what was going on that day, and I had no idea. And I thought, well, that was less than a 1/4 teaspoon. All I did was react to a situation and empathize for a moment. And they absolutely, it made the difference for their day. And that's the key. Without that leaven, without that little 1/4 teaspoon, that's what makes the difference in the whole mix that's coming together.
Awesome. There's a lot of wisdom in your book, almost like the modern day book in Proverbs, and you give a lot of advice of how to avoid common mistakes and the common mistakes that we make, and to keep us from living a purposeful and a flourishing life. What are those? And how could we avoid those mistakes?
Yeah. That's a great question, Rosemary. Thank you for asking that. I think the common mistakes that people make, as I've asked and taken a look, they can come under two categories. One is the fix it, do it. If I see it, I fix it, I go forward, make it happen. I'm working under my own power, period. And that's it. I see something that needs to be done, I do it. Rather than stop, take a step back, reflect, pray, look at what God's doing, look for that three-dimensional picture, and let Him lead the way rather than me leading the way. The other big mistake I think that people make, and it keeps us from living that fulfilled life I know that He has for us, is fear. Mm-hmm. It's the fear of a lot of things. It's the fear of not being enough, which we talked about. It's the fear of missing out. It's the fear of failure.
Right.
It's the fear of what will happen if I do act. I'll be rejected, or people won't, care. But it's that fear that gets at the bottom of keeping us back from doing what we know is right, or knowing to do what we can make a difference, or to try something new, like me being here today. To try something where I can't plan it to the nth degree, right?
We're afraid every time we come in, but somehow God gives us what we need. That's right.
It's like, what? You want me to do what? To do what? When? So, but I don't have the time to plan, which I'm the planner and all that, and so I can't do that. So those fears or moving forward on my own power are, I think, the two common things that really hold us back. And I think that the answer to that really is about knowing, it's a phrase that has started to guide my life so much, and it is knowing that God is always at work. Mm-hmm. He says it in John 5:17. My Father is still working, and I too am at work. Notice that's a present progressive.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
By the way, it's past, present, and it's future. He is always at work. And it's just a matter of me joining Him where He is at work without fear, even when it's trying to do things that I'm not used to or don't do very often. A new thing, a new circumstance, a difficulty, a challenge that I would rather shy away from. All of those, God can get us through.
Yeah, He's the God that never sleeps. And so I'm so thankful for that, that while I'm sleeping, He's still at work. But sometimes we do take that leap of faith, and this dot jumps into the sea of dots and tries to make a difference. And I know all of us have done that. And my most recent thing that I've jumped into is going back to school, which I never thought I would do. I said the last time I was in school, I would not go back to school. I said, that's done. I'm done. I'm happy with a master's degree. I don't need any more. But then God had a different idea. And so this dot is doing it. But sometimes, right now we're just, trying to finish, but it's a rough stretch. And sometimes when I go through a rough stretch, what I do is I go back to the times that God has been there for me, that He has got me through. Just even the last time I went to school, He used to just, He led me through it. And so you have a section in your book called Surrounded by a Great Cloud of Witnesses. And in that section, you talk about the importance of remembering some of the ways God helped you in the past. Can you talk a little bit about that part of your book?
Yes. The Great Cloud of Witnesses is thinking back on the people who have been closest to me and impacted me greatly in my life. Of course, there's grandparents and parents, and as well as friends who, through a situation that we worked through, made a huge impact. And the Great Cloud of Witnesses, as well as just all the circumstances through life, it's important to remember those, to find a way to, either through pictures or scrapbooking or journaling or whatever, to remember those moments of what they've taught you or what God's taught you by carrying you through these different experiences. For me, there's one story about remembering, and it was my father when we were traveling as kids. We were going from Kansas City, where we were living at the time, back to Dallas or on vacation to various states. And He would always, about when everybody was snoozing it away, he would, on the road, and we were about to cross a state line, he would stop the car. All right, everybody out, we got to take a picture at the state line. And it had to be under the sign. So you have entering Kansas, and we have it. Entering Texas, we have it. We have all of those. But it was about, no, for him, it was about, this is how we're going to remember these times. And it was important to remember those times.
Today I heard a prophetic word, and it just spoke to me so much. And she was talking about the area that we live in. We live in Dallas, where this show's being taped. And she said that God in this area is digging up old wells. And so that's, let me explain, that struck me so much because it was like remembering, like what we're talking about, because I thought of old wells in Dallas. Well, my great-great-grandfather was a pastor here in Dallas. And so he made a mark, at First Baptist Dallas. And he was a second pastor there. And so I thought of him, thought digging up old wells. And I'm the first person to go into ministry since him.
Wow.
And so he's digging up an old well that was built and was dug here years and years ago. And so I was remembering this person, even though I didn't know him. I have his bio, and I was just remembering the things that he did. And I think that's so important. It gives us strength.
It gives us strength, and it reminds us, just as he delivered before for that great cloud of witnesses and all of their stories, just as he's delivered before for us, God is going to deliver us through whatever challenges we have. And those, remembering those things, and particularly at challenging times or milestone moments in our life, that's what strengthens us. It helps us to push forward rather than give up. It helps us to remember he did it before. He's the God everlasting of promises, and he'll do it again, so that his memory doesn't fade. It helps us to do what the Israelites and even Jesus's disciples didn't do well. They'd go through one crisis, and then the next crisis would come, and they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, we're going to die again."
We don't do that.
But it's only, of course you're going to have that reaction to a crisis initially, but it's in the remembering, oh yeah, he's delivered me before, this is not going to be easy, but I just need to take the next step. He's going to deliver me again. I may not know how, I may not see the answer right now, but I can trust he's going to do it over and over and over again, because he has a purpose for each and every one of us, and an ultimate purpose for all of his children.
Well, in remembering, there's this video game, I don't know if y'all know about it, it's called Pac-Man, and it was about 40-ish years ago. I don't know if I remember it. But anyway, the premise of it was this Pac-Man's coming to eat all these dots, really in hot pursuit, trying to get them all. And while the Lord isn't going to gobble us up, he is in hot pursuit of us. And he continually comes after his beloved children. And I really like that in one of your books, in the last section, it's called Choices. And you talk about this pursuit. You talk about how God is coming after us. So sometimes people want to run away from God. Why shouldn't they?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I sure tried it a lot of times.
Haven't we all?
Haven't we all? I have come to know God as the hound of heaven. There's a poem about that. I can't remember all the words, but they talk about him as a hound of heaven. God is wooing us constantly. He wants to be in relationship with us completely. Christ wants to be our best friend forever. And so until we answer that, he's after us because he wants his best for us. But until we get rid of I can do it myself and all the fears that we have, we'll never give into that and never really realize the full value, the full purpose that God wants for us, the full abundance of his love, the good for us. It says in Romans 8, 28 and 29, for he always works the good for those who love him. But you have to put verse 29 with that, because what's that good? It's to be in the image of Christ. Yeah. And that's how we're going to experience that all-encompassing love of God, of Christ, and everything that he did for us. And if we run away, if we don't make the choice to press forward, to be in relationship with God, then we lose out on all of that good. We lose out on that abundance. We end up making detours off the road, or I call it, I'm in the ruts now of life, because I made a detour somewhere and it was not where he was asking me to go. So that's why I think it's so important for us to yield ourselves to, that's the direction, that's where the GPS is guiding us, that's what we need to do.
Yeah.
Do you know, Gloria, this book is so full of your life experiences, and sometimes we never know how our testimony will impact somebody else, because that's very important. What was the biggest takeaway that you had in reflecting as you wrote your book?
Yeah, the biggest takeaway I have is actually it occurred a couple of years ago where it pulled everything together. And a couple of years ago, in 2019, I was coming off of a season of loss after loss after loss. Some by choice, some by circumstance, where I was shedding a lot of things. And I was coming down to where I remember sitting in the living room of a friend of mine and in tears almost, because I said, what value do I have now? You know, I mean, everything is gone, you know, status, power, position, purpose, etc., that I had. And shortly after that, we took a trip to Israel. I thought, well, it's my big vacation, it was on my bucket list, why not? But it was in Israel, and interestingly enough, it was in front of a tree, and it was the tree in the Garden of Gethsemane. It was an olive tree. And our tour guide was explaining how the olive tree sustains itself for thousands of years. And this tree is huge. I couldn't even begin to wrap myself around it. And what he explained was that the olive tree continues to recreate itself. The inner bark, not the outer, but the inner bark dies all the way down to the ground. And once that has happened, there are sprouts from its deep roots that will begin to come forth. And a new tree comes from the inside of that old bark out and create a whole new tree. And so it's just continuing to go through this process over thousands of years. And it hit me. That's what's happened in my life, time and time again. The losses just became nothing more than sprouts of a new tree that God was trying to grow and sustain within me. And sure enough, after I came back from that trip, I could see that new tree sprout. As I began to look deeper at the dots and connect them, I could see those new sprouts coming. And the tree has continued to grow and give off new branches that I never imagined possible. And so that's been my life before, which I didn't realize that was what was happening, but especially then and now, even going forward in what I now call Act 3, Stage 2.
That's right. Yeah, he reinvents us many, many times. And I do know that olive tree in the Garden of Gethsemane. It's 1,400 plus years old. It's one of the oldest olive trees in Israel. And here's another fact about the olive tree is that the roots never die. Just what you're saying, the roots never die. Other things die, and then, like you say, new sprouts come off the roots. And that was a message for me, which I won't get into. It's a whole nother story, but why I'm in school right now and why I'm studying Judaism. So anyway, I'm still a Christian, I'm Messianic, but you know, it was the olive tree speaks to a lot of people.
It speaks to us.
So, you know, you just gave a great story, a great dot, a great moment about how your life changed and something that you realized, but you have a lot of different stories in this book. Is there one that also moved your life forward or made a huge difference in your life?
Absolutely.
Can you share something? Yes.
This one was foundational, that has kept me going even through the years and to remember. This event happened during our daughter's senior year in high school. And you know how senior years are, everything is important. And we were going to her most important and final choir event. She was in a choir with 125 other kids, and they have a huge auditorium, so there were going to be like 1,000 people there. And we were supposed to record it because this was the big final event. And so we went to the event, and we had talked to her about, well, which side of this big auditorium do we need to sit on so we can see you and record? And she said, well, on the right side. So we get there early, we sit on the right side, we're 5 rows back from the front. Perfect, we are set. However, we did not account for the curvature of the bleachers. So our daughter begins to, file on with the other 125. She's second row from the top. And the curvature is so sharp on the bleachers that she's facing the left, not on the right, where we are. And so I'm jumping up, and plus all the kids, as they're finishing filing on, there's a lot of tall ones in front of her, and thinking, oh my God, I can't see her, And I'm jumping up, and I'm trying to figure out where are we going to go, and what are we going to do, and of course, the place is full. There's 1,000 parents and children that are there and friends. And so I sit down in the chair, and I've got my arms crossed, and I'm in a huff. And I just close my eyes, and I'm trying to calm myself down. And the choir director comes on, and the lights go down, and she begins the concert. And while I'm sitting there with my eyes closed, trying to stay calm, that we're going to miss this great event on video, I hear it, a voice. And it's the same voice that I've heard practicing these songs over the last several months in our dining room. It's the same voice that I hear chattering away about her day at our dinners, or the same voice that's talking about her day to me as we get ready in this tiny little one-room bathroom every morning. It's my daughter's voice. And out of 125 students, I could pick out that alto soprano voice of hers. And I could almost listen to the whole concert very distinctly hearing her voice. And what occurred to me after I thought about that was that if I, a mere mortal, can hear my daughter out of 125 students, I know God hears me.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Well, thank you, Gloria, so much for being here with us and sharing about how you connected the dots and how we can connect the dots in your book, Connecting the Dots. So, learning to live in a word-shaped life. I love this. Anyway, if you want to reach Gloria, you can reach her at gloriaashby.connectingthedots@gmail.com.
And a big thank you to our television networks, Faith Unveiled Network, Paula White, Life Network for Women, King Television, Overcomers TV, and CTF TV.
And also thanks to Grace Point Media, did the production on today's show. For all your media needs, go to gracepoint.media. Well, that is Pop Talk for today. We're just ordinary girls
Who God's turning into pearls.
Have a great week.